Welcome to Heaven Awaits. My name is Leigh, and I narrate the near-death experiences of those who have died and have seen the other side. These videos are meant to bring hope to a sometimes hopeless world. If you enjoy these videos, please consider hitting the thumbs up, subscribe, and bell icons to be notified of new content. Doing so is free, and it does help the channel grow. Get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and let's dive into today's experience. I grew up in a small town in Northern California called Philo. I say small town, and you all think you know what a small town is. No, think smaller. In the 1970 census, they counted 93 people there. We moved there shortly after that, so it was a little in-joke in our house that now there were 98 people. We kept that as a joke only in our house because the other 93 people in that town would not have liked that kind of joke. They were real country people there. It was a farming community, and this was the beginning of the 1970s, but the attitudes of this area were more like the 50s. Unbeknownst to me at the time, my parents, my father especially, were not country people. They were city people. They were hippies. They'd met in Los Angeles. Then my mom got pregnant with me, and I was born. My father was trying to start a coffee shop, and it was going bankrupt. I think because he found it distasteful to make a profit on LSD. He took the last of his money and bought an old school bus, a short bus, and ripped out all the benches and put in a playpen for me, and a wood stove with a chimney going out top. They decided to set out and find some place to go back to the land. They wanted to be back to the land hippies like they read about in the Whole Earth catalog. They also decided to become born-again Christians. I'm not sure why. I suspect it was the LSD. So they set off from Los Angeles with this bus and went all the way across the country to Florida, and then back across the country to California. And my dad crashed the bus right outside of Philo, so that's where I grew up. Water was a problem back then too. It's even worse now. The house we ended up in had a small cistern from a spring that was enough water for household usage. My father had this fantasy of having a farm and being back to the land. He wasn't a farmer. He was a union carpenter. That's how he made his living. He wanted this farm, and I think it was because that was the only way he could figure out how to utilize the free child labor he had. To get water for the farm, there was a cliff out behind the workshop, and then the pig pen, and then there was this 50-foot cliff down to a creek. So he ran a line down to the creek and put in a 220-volt submersible pump and a hose that went up the cliff to a big holding tank that just had a flotation switch on it. That was the water that supplied all of our garden and the animals. Fast forward 10 years, 1979. It was late in the summer and I was chilling, doing something. I heard my dad whistling this crazy loud whistle he could do that I never learned, and yelled my name. Oh no. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I hustled over as quickly as I could. I wasn't sure what kind of a beating I was going to get. He had a scrub brush and told me that he thought the pump was clogged with algae and he wanted me to go down and clean it off. For a second, I was kind of irked that it was a chore out of the blue, and then I thought, you know what? It's swimming in the creek. That's what I do for fun. So I'm just going to adjust my attitude and make this a good time. I took the scrub brush, and you couldn't go right down the cliff. You had to go about a quarter mile down the hill until the hill got down to the creek level, and then hike back up upstream to where the geology of the creek met the cliff. That's why the cliff was there. It sort of formed this borehole in the winter when the water was high and made a kind of steep little pit right there. That was why the irrigation pump was there. It was deep. The rest of the creek was ankle deep at this time of year. So I get down there and go in the water, and it's up to about my waist. Only about 2 or 3 feet to the pump, but by then it'll be over my head. I'm looking at the algae on the pump, and there are these diaphanous streamers of algae. I thought, okay, I can do this. I can do this in one breath. At the time, I knew I could hold my breath for a little over 2 minutes. I knew this because the only high-tech tool I had was a stopwatch. We kids were unsupervised all summer, and so we just had this contest all the time of who could stay underwater the longest. That summer, I was the champion. I even beat an older kid. He was about 13. And I learned from that there's a certain type of country person where if a younger kid beats them, they become your enemy for life. I set a goal of finishing the whole thing in one breath. hyperventilated for a little while to get the oxygen up, took a big breath, dove under. I found that I had to kind of hold onto the pump with one hand. The intake of the pump was a stainless steel cylinder, about 2 feet long, about as big around as a coffee can. There's a grill on it. As soon as I started scrubbing, the algae looked very weak and soft, but it turned out to be tough to scrub off. The intake of the pump was keeping the algae matted up to it even as it scrubbed off. It was fouling the scrub brush, and I had to keep kind of shaking the scrub brush out. I got about halfway across and had to switch hands, so I was doing it left-handed. I was starting to need air at this point, so I started getting a little air trickle out my nose. That's a little way you can trick your brain into giving you a little more time. I was almost done. It was just one little strip to go, and my chest was starting to heave a little bit, that subconscious urge to take a breath. And I thought, okay, I didn't make it. I give up. I got to get air. I always had a cinematic imagination, so I imagined myself pushing off the bottom and blowing out my air while still underwater, and then the bubbles sort of breaking the surface and my face coming right up to the bubbles to get my breath of air. So that's what I did. I blew out all my air and pushed off. I reached up and grabbed the pipe that was coming off the top of the pump. I also grabbed the 220-volt electrical line that my dad had made the connection, twisting the wires together and wrapping them in electrical tape. So 220 volts immediately clamped my hand down on the pipe. That much electricity puts every nerve and every muscle into full clench. So I was immediately in a position where whatever muscle group the flexors were fighting the extensors, whichever one was the strongest, and I was just in the position of wherever the physical limit of that range of motion is. So I was arched over backward, my head upside down, and my eyes are open. I could feel the electricity pouring into my hand, a really strange feeling, and down my arm to where it hit the water. Where the water was, it felt like a ring of it flowing out into the water. I could still feel a lot more of it flowing all through the rest of me. I could feel it flowing out of my elbow underwater, out of my armpits. On my other hand, I could feel it flowing out of my palm and my fingertips, out of my groin, my knees, and the bottom of my feet. I could feel that my heart was just clenched like a fist. It had a distinct feeling of not beating. It felt like it was buzzing like the sound that a funky fluorescent light makes, but far more painful. I was kind of surprised. My internal monologue at this point was calm and was like, well, that's it. You're out of air already and now your heart's not even beating, so you're dead. That's it. You're done. And I thought, okay. I could see the rocks underwater. My head was upside down, so I was kind of looking up to the bottom of the creek. I could see minnows swimming around. I could see it was only about an inch or two of water in front of my eyes. I could see the shore. I could see the sand and the willow trees, and I could see a lot of bright blue sky, and I could see the sun. I thought, well, this is taking a long time. Isn't my life supposed to flash before my eyes or something? As soon as I thought that, I saw that the sun was kind of shimmering, and I couldn't move to look at it, but it sort of became the focus of my attention. The shimmery edge of it looked like something was spinning around it, these concentric circles right around the sun and kind of coming closer. They looked like little black buzzsaws, and there were 2 sets of them, and they were spinning in opposite directions, but missing each other each time they went around. And it looked like they were getting bigger or coming closer, and there were more and more of them coming off the sun. As they got bigger, they looked like a bunch of paisleys smashed together, or maybe a starfish, spinning. Then I noticed that it looked like there was a drop of dew in the middle of one, and my attention went to that. It felt like peeking through a keyhole. I saw a scene that was like I was on the ceiling of our kitchen in the house I grew up in, and I was looking down at my mom's head and back from above. Standing next to her was a little toddler holding her skirt for balance, and I realized that that was me, and I was looking down from this strange vantage point at a scene from my life. I thought, oh, this is what it must mean to have your life flash before your eyes. So I looked into another one of those weird shapes, and it had the same effect. I looked through that hole, and I saw myself when I was maybe 3 years old, and we'd just gotten our puppy Molasses, and I was playing with the puppy. And then I looked at another one, and I was a year older. I was maybe 4 or 5, and one of my chores was to put the chickens back in the coop at night. So it was dusk, and it was the same vantage point, looking down on the top of my head, and Molasses and I were herding the chickens into the coop. I looked into another one, and it was a scene of a kid older than me. He was wearing a yellow t-shirt and blue jeans and blue nylon sneakers and crossing a creek that looked very much like this creek, but wasn't. He stepped on a dry rock to cross, and the rock shifted. His foot went in the water, and he kind of jumped the rest of the way across. And I thought, oh, that's bull. That's not me. That's older than me. This isn't my life flashing before my eyes. This is my brain getting cooked by electricity and just showing me what I thought I was supposed to see. I was disappointed and upset about that. Right then there was this strange click feeling, and the power shut off and my hand let go. I thought, oh, I'm not dead yet. Now at this point, these black shapes were still coming off the sun and still coming closer. There were just thousands and thousands of them, and they were swirling around, covering up almost the entire sky. I just had this intuition that as soon as I couldn't see any more of the real world, and all I saw were these black shapes, then that would mean I'd be dead. I thought, okay, I'm not getting electrocuted anymore, and I felt my heart beating again, so I just sort of tipped my head up a little bit and took a breath. As I took the breath, I felt pain just flood back in, and I realized it hadn't hurt for a while there. It hurt right at first, and then there was that whole time I was looking at the pictures it didn't hurt. And now it hurt a lot, and I went back underwater, and my right arm didn't work at all, and my face was kind of bumping on the rocks underwater, and I couldn't get my wits about me. I thought, I'm going to drown now. It got shallow quick, and the current was taking me to where it was shallower. I got my hand down and managed to get some air. Then I recovered a little bit and managed to crawl up onto the sand. I was shivering and crying, and finally, I could get up. I looked up at the top of the cliff, and right there was my dad, and he was coiling up the hose. He had just finished cleaning out the pig pen. I yelled up to him, "Dad, I got shocked. I need to come up." He said, "Did you finish cleaning the pump?" He could tell because I hesitated that I hadn't finished yet. He said, "Finish cleaning the pump, and then you can come up." My fingers were all puffy and kind of cooked looking, and my right arm didn't work, but I said, well, I was on the left-handed part now anyway. I muttered, "Where is the scrub brush?" And I started looking around for it. Then I saw it about 1/8 of a mile down the creek, just bobbing along. There's no way I can catch that. It's faster than I am at this point. For the first time, I disobeyed my father and went back up the trail. I snuck through the tall grass and waited till he was invisible, and then I climbed over the fence and snuck into the house and went straight to my mom. I never went to the doctor or anything. My arm feeling came back over the next couple of days, and I could use it again. We wrapped up my hand with bandages and put some sunburn cream on it. Then a couple of years later, I must have been about 13, we were in the next town over, Boonville, visiting our friends. I was down in the creek playing with the kids, and I'm crossing the creek, and the rock shifts. My foot goes in the water, and I jump across. I look down, and I'm wearing those bright blue nylon sneakers and blue jeans and a yellow t-shirt, and I realized, oh, that was the last scene I saw that pissed me off so much. That was my life flashing before my eyes. Up to that point, I'd been raised pretty fundamentally as a Christian, which is weird for a hippie kid, but my parents decided to be born-again Christians. I had gone to a Christian elementary school, and now I was back in a public junior high school and sort of learning the other kind of science, which tells you evolution is true as opposed to how to refute evolutionists, which was the first part of my education. But when I realized that I had seen the future and what was possible, it meant that there was something fundamentally missing in everything I'd learned so far, and nobody knew what the truth was. I realized that the only truth that I knew was real was that there was a part of me that was watching over me and somehow existed outside of time, so maybe this isn't a Christian versus non-Christian thing. What did you think of Abraham's experience? Do you think his dad put him in severe danger? Do you think that he really did see his future and that he potentially was killed by being electrocuted that day while cleaning the pump? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I look forward to seeing and reading all of your comments. Until next time, stay safe and continue to be blessed.